You know what's insane? A t-shirt today costs $5 and dies in 6 months. But textile fragments from 1200 AD, buried in mud for 800 years, still have vivid color, not faded gray, brilliant red, deep blue. Modern chemistry can't explain it. Or rather, modern chemistry refuses to explain it. Because here's the thing. Medieval artisans weren't just making clothes. They were engineering molecular bonds so permanent that sunlight, water, and centuries couldn't break them. They understood something about materials that we've deliberately forgotten. This isn't romantic nostalgia. This is chemistry. The kind of chemistry that terrifies an industry built on planned obsolescence. Today, we're recreating the complete medieval textile process, from raw fleece to finished fabric. We'll spin yarn that has soul, weave cloth that responds to human touch, dye it with techniques that create permanent molecular structures, and waterproof it with compounds that make Gore-Tex look primitive. By the end, you'll know exactly why your clothes fall apart while 800-year-old fabric survives. Can an industry built on disposability survive knowledge built on permanence? Let's find out. Understanding the fibers. Our journey begins not with a loom, but with the very soul of the fabric, the fiber itself. In the high medieval world of 1000 to 1400 AD, you couldn't just order a cone of perfect yarn. You started with the raw stuff, and your understanding of it was the foundation for everything else. The three major fibers that clothed medieval Europe were wool, linen, and silk, each with its own regional specialties and applications. Wool was the undisputed king, especially in England, Flanders, and northern France. It was basically the engine of the medieval economy. But wool isn't just one thing. Medieval Europe had dozens of distinct sheep breeds, each producing fleece with different characteristics. English wool from the Cotswolds was prized across Europe for its length and strength, while Spanish merino produced the finest, softest fibers. After washing the greasy, dirty fleece in streams or wooden tubs, the real decision was made. Would you card it or would you comb it? This choice determined everything that followed. Carding was done with a pair of flat wooden boards covered in metal hooks. You'd pass the wool between them, teasing it into a fluffy, airy cloud called a rowleg. This was perfect for shorter wools and created what medieval artisans called woolen yarn. When spun from carded wool, the fibers trap tons of air, creating fabric that's warm, fuzzy, and thick, perfect for a heavy cloak to keep out the brutal northern European winters. Combing, on the other hand, was a more refined process for the longest, most valuable fibers. Wool combs are fearsome-looking tools, like giant dog brushes with long, sharp metal teeth. By drawing the wool through these, you align all the long fibers parallel to each other and remove the short, weak bits. This creates a smooth, dense preparation called top. Spinning this creates worsted yarn. It's smooth, strong, and has a beautiful drape. This was the yarn for fine gowns and the sturdy hose that medieval people wore under their clothes. Then there was flax, which grew particularly well in the Low Countries. If wool was the workhorse, linen was the symbol of purity and cleanliness. But its clean, crisp feel comes at the cost of an insane amount of labor. To get from a flax plant to spinnable fiber requires months of work. First, the plants are pulled, not cut, to get the full length. Then comes retting, a controlled rotting process where bundles of flax are submerged in water or spread on grass for weeks. After retting and drying, the real work starts. The stalks are broken with a wooden tool called a brake, then scutched, beaten with a wooden knife to knock away the broken bits. Finally, the fibers are heckled by drawing them through increasingly fine beds of metal teeth. Only then do you have beautiful silky fibers ready to spin into thread. Finally, there was silk, imported at enormous expense from Byzantine territories and later from Italian silk-producing regions like Lucca. This was reserved for the highest nobility and the church. A silk-lined cloak was a visible declaration of immense wealth. For our project, we're following the backbone of medieval European textile production, English wool. We'll comb it to prepare a worsted yarn, the same choice a guild weaver in medieval London or Bruges would have made for high-quality cloth. The magic of the spindle. With our combed wool ready, we come to the first great secret that modern industry truly fears. Not because it's complicated, but because it's so deceptively simple and utterly irreplaceable. This is the magic of hand spinning. Today, we picture spinning wheels from fairy tales, But for most of the High Middle Ages, the primary tool was far more ancient, the drop spindle. Archaeological evidence shows these simple tools were used across medieval Europe, from Ireland to Poland. It's just a wooden shaft with a weight called a haul. This humble tool is a masterpiece of physics. The haul acts like a flywheel, storing rotational energy from a flick of your fingers, letting the spindle twist fibers together while you focus on drafting. The whole process is a rhythm of 3 actions: drafting, twisting, and winding on. First is drafting. This is the real skill that separates a master spinner from a beginner. You hold the fiber supply in one hand and gently pull a controlled number of fibers away with the other. Too few, the thread breaks; too many, it's a lumpy mess. It's an intuitive feel, a conversation between your fingers and the wool. A machine does this with cold mathematical precision, resulting in perfectly uniform but ultimately lifeless yarn. But a human spinner responds to the fiber. They can feel a slightly thick section and draft a little finer to compensate. This creates yarn, with what medieval sources called character, a gentle organic variation that modern textile engineers would consider a defect. But that's not a flaw. It's the signature of a human hand. This variation gives hand-woven cloth a living quality that machine-made fabric can never replicate. While you're drafting, the spindle hangs and spins, and that twist travels up the fibers, locking them into a strong thread. The amount of twist is critical. Medieval spinners developed an intuitive understanding through years of practice. Too little twist, and the yarn falls apart under tension. Too much, and it becomes a kinky, wiry mess that's impossible to weave. Here's another crucial detail that most people don't know. The direction of the twist matters enormously. You can spin clockwise for what we call a Z-twist or counterclockwise for an S-twist. Medieval guild regulations often specified twist direction for different types of cloth. For strong cloth, you need to ply the yarn. This means taking 2 or more single threads and twisting them together in the opposite direction. So 2 Z-twist singles get plied together with an S-twist. This creates a balanced yarn where the opposing forces cancel each other out, resulting in incredibly strong, stable thread. This was fundamental knowledge every medieval spinner possessed. The final step is winding on. Once you have an arm's length of new yarn, you stop the spindle, unhook the yarn and wind it around the shaft. Then you hook it back on and continue, drafting, twisting, winding on, over and over. It's slow. A skilled medieval spinner might produce enough yarn for a simple tunic in several weeks of steady work. But in this slowness, you develop an intimate knowledge of the fiber. Modern spinning machines are about speed and brute force. They bully the fiber into submission with thousands of RPMs and mechanical precision. Hand spinning is a partnership. The spinner works with the fiber, responding to its nature. This synergy between human skill and natural material is the first and perhaps most profound technique that can never ever be automated. And it's exactly this human element that creates the soul of medieval textiles. The weaver's dance. The loom is dressed. Hundreds of threads stretch in perfect parallel lines, a field of potential energy waiting to be transformed. All the weeks of preparation have led to this moment. Now the weaver's dance begins. This is where medieval craftsmanship becomes visible magic. The process is a rhythm that becomes almost meditative, a sequence that guild weavers could perform for hours without breaking concentration. First, creating the shed. The weaver presses a foot treadle connected to the shafts holding the heddles. This separates the warp threads into 2 layers, creating a triangular opening called the shed. Second is the pick. The weft thread is wound on a wooden bobbin inside a boat-shaped shuttle. With a practiced flick of the wrist, the weaver sends the shuttle flying through the shed, trailing a single line of weft yarn behind it. Third is the beat. The weaver pulls a heavy wooden frame called the beater forward. The reed inside catches the new weft thread and packs it firmly against the previous one with a satisfying thunk. Shed, pick, beat, change treadles, pick, beat. A steady percussion fills the workshop, the sound that meant prosperity in medieval cloth towns like Bruges, Florence and London. And inch by inch, cloth grows from nothing. Within this simple rhythm lies endless possibility. The most basic pattern is tabby or plain weave, a simple over one, under one grid that creates strong, versatile fabric. But medieval weavers mastered complex patterns. Twill weave, characterized by diagonal lines, was incredibly popular for woolen clothing because it created fabric that was both strong and flexible. More complex patterns required multiple shafts and careful planning. Diamond twill, herringbone, and intricate geometric patterns were all within the skill range of a master guild weaver. These patterns weren't just decorative, they served functional purposes. Twill drapes better than plain weave. Certain patterns are more resistant to tearing. Medieval weavers understood these properties intimately. And here's where we confront the quality that modern industry truly fears. An industrial power loom operates at incredible speed, but requires perfectly uniform yarn. Our hand-spun yarn, with its subtle variations, would be a nightmare for a modern machine. It would hit a thicker section, and the thread would snap, halting production. But a hand weaver develops a relationship with their materials. They can feel when the weft thread is slightly thicker and instinctively beat it more gently. When they encounter a thin spot, they adjust the tension. This constant, subtle adaptation is a conversation between craftsperson and material. This creates cloth with qualities that can't be replicated by machines, a natural hand, subtle texture variations, and a resilience that comes from human responsiveness. It's not perfection in the modern sense. It's something better. It's harmony. Medieval waterproofing secrets. But colour wasn't the only way medieval artisans transformed their textiles. In a world without modern synthetics, staying dry wasn't just about comfort. It was literally a matter of survival. And here medieval craftsmen developed techniques that modern outdoor gear companies are only beginning to understand. The foundation of medieval waterproofing lay in a substance that every shepherd knew intimately: lanolin. This waxy, slightly greasy compound is sheep's natural protection against weather. It's what keeps wool dry even in driving rain. But medieval artisans discovered they could concentrate and redistribute this natural waterproofing throughout finished cloth. The process required precise knowledge and timing. Fresh lanolin was rendered from raw fleece by slow heating, producing a pale yellow sticky substance. But pure lanolin was too soft and would wash out quickly. Medieval craftsmen learned to blend it with other natural materials: pine resin for durability, beeswax for stability, and sometimes even rendered animal fats. The application method was crucial. The cloth had to be warm but not hot, as excessive heat would damage the wool fibers. Artisans would work the lanolin mixture into the fabric by hand, ensuring even distribution. The treated cloth was then stretched and allowed to cure, often for several days. The results were remarkable. A properly treated woolen cloak could shed rain for hours while remaining breathable. Unlike modern waterproof coatings that create an impermeable barrier, lanolin-treated wool maintained its natural ability to regulate temperature and humidity. This meant the wearer stayed dry from both external moisture and internal condensation. This wasn't just theoretical knowledge. Medieval shepherds, sailors and travellers depended on these techniques for survival. Ships' sails were treated with similar mixtures to withstand ocean storms. Mountain travellers wore cloaks that could mean the difference between life and death in sudden weather changes. Tomorrow, I'll be releasing a detailed video showing exactly how to extract and prepare lanolin using methods that haven't changed in 800 years. We'll also cover pine resin collection and processing techniques that every medieval survivalist would have known. If you want to see these practical skills in action, make sure to check out that video. The knowledge of natural waterproofing represents something that modern industry has largely abandoned, working with materials rather than against them. Where modern gear creates barriers, medieval techniques created harmony between natural fibers and natural protection. The final touch: the cloth is woven, dyed and waterproofed. You might think our medieval textile is complete, but there were still crucial steps that separated rough cloth from finished fabric. These processes, known collectively as finishing, could double or triple the value of the textile. For woolen cloth, the most transformative step was fulling. Fresh off the loom, our cloth is relatively loose and open. Fulling was the process of controlled shrinkage that created the dense, weather-resistant fabric medieval people depended on. In its earliest form, fulling was done by human feet. Workers would trample cloth in wooden tubs filled with warm water and alkaline solutions. While urine was sometimes used due to its ammonia content, more commonly fullers used solutions made from wood ash or imported potash, This combination of moisture, alkalinity and agitation caused the microscopic scales on wool fibres to interlock and mat together. By the 13th century, many regions had developed water-powered fulling mills. These used massive wooden hammers powered by water wheels to pound the cloth rhythmically for hours. The sound of fulling mills became the soundtrack of medieval cloth towns. As the cloth was beaten, it would shrink dramatically, sometimes by half in each direction, but it became much denser, thicker, and naturally water-resistant. The transformation was remarkable. Loose, open weaving became tight, almost felt like fabric. After fulling, the cloth was stretched on large wooden frames called tenters, held by sharp metal hooks along the edges. This is exactly where we get the phrase, on tenter hooks, referring to being in a state of tension and uncertainty. For the finest cloths, there were additional steps. The surface could be brushed with the dried heads of teasel plants to raise a soft nap. This nap was then carefully sheared to an even length, with massive iron shears that required 2 people to operate. Some luxury fabrics went through this process multiple times, creating surfaces as smooth and lustrous as velvet. Each finishing step was a specialized trade with its own guild, its own secrets, and its own standards. The progression from rough cloth to finished textile represented a chain of craftsmanship that added immense value and functionality. It demonstrates a commitment to the performance and beauty of fabric that modern fast fashion has largely abandoned. Conclusion: the living legacy. And so, after weeks of intensive work, from a handful of raw fleece through the ancient rhythm of the spindle, past the precise geometry of the loom, into the alchemical transformations of dye and waterproofing treatments, and through the final metamorphosis of fulling, here it is, a piece of medieval cloth. At first glance, you might think it's simply fabric, but hold it, and you immediately understand what we've lost. It has substance, a weight and density that feels permanent. The surface, dyed with madder root, isn't flat or uniform. It's a living landscape of deep reds and subtle orange undertones that shift with the light. The waterproofing treatment has given it a subtle hand, a slight waxy feel that speaks of protection against the elements. Look closely, and you can still see the ghost of the spinner's hand in the gentle variation of the yarn. These aren't flaws, they're the signature of human skill and the story of the cloth's creation. The true revelation isn't any single technique we've demonstrated today. It's the entire philosophy behind medieval textile production. Every step involved human judgment, skill, and adaptation. Every decision was made by someone who understood their materials intimately and could respond to their unique characteristics. So what is the medieval textile technique that modern industry fears most? So now we understand the molecular secret, chemical bonds that last centuries, colors that defy time itself. But color wasn't the only way medieval artisans made their textiles immortal. Because in a world without plastics, without synthetics, without modern chemistry, staying dry in the rain wasn't about comfort, it was survival. And what they discovered makes every modern waterproofing technology look like a temporary fix. This is the technique that shepherds trusted with their lives, that sailors depended on in ocean storms, that mountain travelers knew could mean the difference between freezing to death and making it home. Natural waterproofing that actually works.
Medieval peasants were forbidden to wear this red. Kings killed for access to this color. Modern synthetic dyes cannot match its permanence after 800 years. The secret was hidden in a simple root. The transformation happens in seconds. White fabric enters a yellow-green liquid. When pulled from the vat, it appears bright yellow. Then oxygen begins the alchemy. Yellow shifts to pale green. Green deepens to turquoise. Within 1 minute, brilliant blue emerges. No modern chemicals, no industrial process, just a leaf, fermentation, and air. This is not merely history, this is revival. The exact protocols that colored royal robes in 1200 AD are about to transform modern fabrics using techniques most people believe are lost forever. For centuries, these colors illuminated a world wrongly imagined as gray. Master artisans held secrets to natural alchemy, engineering spectacular beauty from roots, leaves, and minerals. That connection is not lost. Today, medieval dye protocols will be followed step by step. How did artisans create reds so vibrant they were reserved for royalty? What was the almost magical process that pulled sky blue from fermented leaves? And how can these same systems transform modern fabrics into artifacts of color anyone can create at home? This is where history meets the modern wardrobe. The color economy. Before brewing these colors, the world they created must be understood. The stereotype of the Middle Ages shows drab, colorless peasants. While many wore undyed earth tones, the medieval world for those with power was an explosion of calculated, brilliant color. Color was language. It was visual protocol that instantly communicated wealth, status, profession, and power. In a world without industrial production, creating deep, lasting color was expensive and highly skilled. The brightest, most saturated colors were reserved for the elite, nobility, and church. Sumptuary laws regulated who could wear what, ensuring a commoner could not wear the same scarlet as a king. Wearing vibrant color was not fashion. It was declaration of place in the world. At the center were dyer guilds. These were not simple craftsmen. They were masters of complex secret art. Lesser guilds worked with common plants producing fugitive, duller colors. But greater guilds held crown jewels, substances producing brilliant, light-fast colors that would not fade in sun or wash out in rain. Two substances were most critical, madder and woad. The red protocol. In the medieval world, red was the color of earthly power. It was the blood of Christ, the fire of love and authority of kings. Charlemagne reportedly wore scarlet at his coronation. The source for the most coveted reds in Europe was a plant called madder, or Rubia tinctorum. The magic lived not in leaves, but in gnarled roots. Humans used madder for millennia. Dyed textiles found in the Indus Valley date to 3000 BC. Romans understood its value. By the Middle Ages, madder was massive industry, particularly in Holland and France. Quality of roots was so vital that markets had strict standards. Trying to pass off inferior madder could result in severe punishment. This was not just about pretty color. This was about international trade and immense wealth. The blue transformation. If red was the color of worldly power, blue was the color of heavens, of divinity. Its status grew immensely over the Middle Ages. The source of this coveted blue in Europe was another humble plant, woad or Isatis tinctoria. Woad was cultivated across Europe. The wealth it created in regions of France was so great they became known as Pays de Cocagne, the land of plenty. The term cocagne itself came from the woad ball shape used for trading. Woad dyeing was entirely different from madder. It was complex, almost magical. The blue pigment, indigoton, is not soluble in water. It cannot simply be boiled from leaves. It must be coaxed out through fermentation and reduction, a process removing oxygen from the vat. Historically, this involved stale urine and other organic matter. Only in this oxygen-free, reduced state, a ghostly yellowish-green liquid, can the dye penetrate fibers. The true magic happens not in the dye pot, but in air. When fabric is pulled from the vat, it appears yellow, but as oxygen hits fibers, stunning transformation occurs. Blue color materializes before the eyes. This process, steeped in mystery and ending in dramatic color change, made woad dyers seem like powerful alchemists. A woad dyer's annual income could reach 400 to 500 silver pennies, double that of ordinary craftsmen. Master dyers in major textile centers accumulated wealth rivaling minor nobility. The city of Toulouse alone had over 60 woad mills operating in the 1400s, each generating substantial revenue. These two dyes were the bedrock of the medieval palette. Understanding their properties and intricate systems required to use them was the key to unlocking the vibrant world of medieval color. Preparation protocols. The history lesson is complete. The work begins. Before dyeing can start, the canvas must be prepared. This is the most important part of the entire process. Mistakes here guarantee failure. This stage is the secret to unlocking vibrant, lasting hues of the past. Two critical protocols, scouring and mordanting. Natural dyes require natural fibers. Wool, silk, cotton, linen work perfectly. Synthetic fibers like polyester will not work. The demonstration uses cotton t-shirt, silk fabric, and pure wool yarn. These are the modern canvases. Equipment must be dedicated. Do not use cooking pots. Natural does not mean non-toxic. Mordants are metallic salts that do not belong near food. A large stainless steel or unchipped enamel pot. Spoons, tongs, kitchen scale, rubber gloves and mask for handling powders are required. Scouring. The deep clean new fabric is covered in oils, waxes, and chemicals called sizing. Without removing this layer, it acts as barrier preventing dye from binding. The medieval solution was remarkably simple. Hot water, soda ash, 1 hour of gentle simmering. This single step is why medieval textiles survived 800 years, while modern dyed fabric fades in months. The process starts by weighing dry fabric. This weight of fiber, or YF, is the basis for all calculations. For cotton, 2 teaspoons of soda ash per 100 grams of fabric. Fill pot with hot water. Dissolve soda ash. Add fabric. Simmer for 1 hour while stirring occasionally. For silk and wool, use pH-neutral soap instead. Fill pot with warm water. Add soap and wetted fibers. Gently heat for 1 hour without boiling. Wool must not boil or experience rapid temperature changes, as this causes felting. After 1 hour, let cool slowly and rinse thoroughly. Fabrics are now stripped of all impurities, ready for the critical next step. Mordanting, the binding agent. The word mordant comes from Latin mordere, meaning to bite. That is exactly what it does. A mordant is metallic salt acting as bridge between fiber and dye. Without mordant, most natural dyes simply wash away. Mordanting provides color fastness and often makes colors dramatically more vibrant. The most important historical mordant is alumum, or potassium aluminum sulfate. For wool and silk, use approximately 15% alumum to weight of fiber. For 100 grams of wool, that means 15 grams of alumum. The technique: fill pot with cool water. In separate jar, dissolve measured alumum in hot water until completely clear. Pour this solution into larger pot and stir. Add scoured, damp wool and silk. Temperature must be raised very slowly, over at least 1 hour, to simmer around 82 degrees Celsius or 180 Fahrenheit. Hold at this temperature for another hour. Do not boil. After 1 hour, turn off heat and let fibers cool completely in mordant bath. This can take hours. Patience is a dyer's greatest virtue. Cotton's extra step. Cellulose fibers like cotton are more resistant. Alumel does not bond to them as easily. An extra step is required: a tannin bath. Tannin acts as primer. It bonds to cellulose fiber. Then alumel mordant bonds to tannin. It is a two-step system. First, the tannin bath. Use approximately 8% tannin to weight of fiber. Dissolve tannin in hot water. Add to bucket of warm water. Add scoured wet cotton. Let soak for at least few hours, or overnight. After tannin bath, squeeze out fabric. Do not rinse. It goes directly into a lamb bath. Use about 5 to 8% alum to weight of fiber. Add tannin-soaked fabric and let soak for 2 to 24 hours. The longer it soaks, the more mordant it absorbs. This is significant work, hours of preparation. But this is the protocol separating amateur from master. This is the unseen work, creating magic. Fabrics are now ready. They are thirsty for color. Brewing ancient colors. The fires are lit, the alchemy begins. Ancient color will be coaxed from root and leaf. The primary coloring molecule in madder is alizarin, famously sensitive to temperature. This is a process that cannot be rushed. Chopped madder root has an earthy, slightly sweet smell. For strong red, use 50 to 100% of weight of fiber. For 100 grams of wool yarn, use 100 grams of madder root. This is how rich, saturated colors of the past were achieved. The extraction process. Place 100 grams of madder root into dye pot. Add enough cool hard water to cover. If water is soft, Add calcium carbonate tablet to help red develop. The critical stage is temperature control. Water must be heated very slowly to 65 to 70 degrees Celsius or 150 to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Madder must never boil. If temperature goes above 75 Celsius, brilliant reds are lost, replaced by muddy browns. A thermometer is essential. Hold dye bath at this temperature for at least 1 hour. The water takes on fiery orange-red glow. Roots are releasing their alizarin. After 1 hour, turn off heat and let cool slightly. The dye bath becomes clear crimson liquid. Add thoroughly wetted, mordanted wool yarn. Submerge gently, ensuring no trapped air bubbles. Heat returns very slowly back to 65 to 70 degrees Celsius. Hold there for another 1 to 2 hours, with gentle stirring every 20 minutes. A secret from old dyers: for deepest colors, let fiber cool completely in dye bath, even overnight. This allows pigment to continue bonding as temperature drops. Turn off heat, cover pot and leave. Woad blue. Dyeing with woad is entirely different. Woad requires oxygen-free or reduced vat. Historically, this meant long odorous fermentation. Modern chemistry achieves the same conditions. The process starts with woad extract powder. Fill dedicated pot with hot tap water, around 50 Celsius or 120 Fahrenheit. Woad requires alkaline pH, so soda ash is dissolved into water. Add woad powder that has been made into paste first. Water turns murky, greenish brown. The reducing agent is added next. This chemical removes oxygen. Stir slowly, avoiding introducing air from surface. Then wait. After 20 to 30 minutes, a change occurs. Liquid clarifies, becoming translucent, yellowish green. A coppery film forms on surface. The vat is reduced. Woad is now in soluble form, ready to attach to fibers. Take mordanted cotton t-shirt and silk fabric. Both thoroughly wet, fold carefully to avoid streaks. Slowly submerge. Move gently beneath surface. Careful not to splash or agitate liquid. That would introduce oxygen and ruin the vat. Fabric remains in vat for just few minutes. Final color is built through multiple short dips, not one long soak. The moment of alchemy. The silk scarf is slowly lifted from the vat. Right now it appears shocking greenish yellow. As oxygen in air hits fabric, transformation begins. The yellow shifts to pale mint green. It deepens, becoming ghostly turquoise. Then it turns blue. In less than 1 minute, silk has gone from yellow to beautiful, clear sky blue, right before the eyes. This is oxidation. This is the magic that made medieval dyers seem like wizards. The piece fully oxidizes for 20 minutes before deciding if another dip is needed for deeper shade. The same is done for cotton t-shirt. Each dip builds upon the last, taking color from sky blue to deep midnight. This process, this patient building of color layer by layer, is connection to a slower, more deliberate time. Why medieval colors cannot be matched. The secret to the permanence and vibrancy of natural dyes lies in molecular chemistry. Modern synthetic dyes and natural dyes work on fundamentally different principles. Synthetic dyes, developed in the 1850s from coal tar and later petroleum, are large, complex molecules. They work through a process called physical absorption. The dye molecule sits on the surface of the fiber, held in place by weak van der Waals forces. These are the same forces that make a piece of paper stick to a wall with static electricity. They are temporary. Natural dyes with mordants work entirely differently. They create actual chemical bonds with the fiber. The mordant, typically an aluminium or iron ion, bonds covalently to the protein in wool and silk. The dye molecule then bonds to the mordant. The result is a permanent molecular structure that is part of the fiber itself. This is why madder red survives 800 years while synthetic red fades in months. The alizarin molecule from madder has formed a coordination complex with aluminium ions that have bonded directly to wool protein. This structure is as permanent as the wool fiber itself. Sunlight cannot break it, washing cannot remove it, Time cannot fade it. The woad blue is even more remarkable. The indigo molecule from woad is unique in the dye world. It is insoluble in water in its colored form. During the reduction process, indigo converts to a temporary soluble form. In this form, it penetrates deep into fiber structure. When oxygen hits the fabric, indigo converts back to its insoluble form, while trapped inside the fiber. The indigo is now physically locked inside the fiber structure. It cannot wash out because it cannot dissolve. It cannot fade because the molecule is inherently lightfast. Its structure absorbs UV radiation without breaking down. Modern science has measured the wash fastness and light fastness of these medieval dyes. Madder with alum mordant on wool achieves a rating of 7 to 8 out of 8 on both scales. This means it can withstand 40 hours of artificial sunlight, equal to 160 hours of natural sunlight, with no measurable color change. It can survive 50 washing cycles with no color loss,